Hello everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video I want to talk about a topic that has become more prevalent in the past 2 weeks of Final Fantasy XIV's community, and that is the idea of the job Samurai being added into the game. Hold your horses, they haven't said exactly when the job is coming yet, although most people are suspecting patch 4.0. The reason why this job is coming to the forefront again is because of a yearly event called the Rising, which is basically the game's in-game event as an anniversary for the relaunch of the game. Now, we had the 2nd year anniversary, so we had the second Rising a couple months ago, and during the event, Naoki Yoshida appears in the game as a character. Now, debate that however you want, but when you speak to him after completing the quest initially, you go back to him and he says something along the lines of, I wonder what jobs we'll add next. Samurai? Red Mage? Oh, but you'll keep these idle musings to yourself, won't you? No, Yoshi P, we won't. So, because of that mention, everyone's all up on the hype about Samurai. Yes, there's hype about Red Mage and Blue Mage too, but I don't know where out of nowhere, it seems, Samurai just became the job I get asked about most. Whether it's on my Twitch stream, it's on Mondays with Mr. Happy, other YouTube comments, Facebook, Twitter, I get asked about it a lot. And while I have spoken about it in other videos, I wanted to make a dedicated video talking about the past of Samurai in Final Fantasy, as well as specifically Final Fantasy XI. Because let's be honest, that's where a lot of people really want to see the Samurai come from, or at least the type of job they want it to embody. Me, I've got some different thoughts about it, but I'll let you know what my answer is to this famous question: should Samurai be a tank or a DPS? Now, I've had multiple thoughts about this in the past, and I've had videos where I say, this is what I think Samurai should be, based on this in the game and whatever. Before I give you that answer though, like I said, let's talk a little bit about the history of Samurai in Final Fantasy and, of course, Final Fantasy XI. Now, while everyone is talking about Samurai now, Naoki Yoshida has been talking about Samurai for the past couple of years. There are plenty of interviews where pretty much people just ask him, are we gonna ever get Samurai? And he basically just gives us that cookie cutter response where he's like, oh, we know it's a job everyone likes, we'll see if we can add it, maybe sometime. But there have been interviews where he's gone a little bit more in depth as to what the plans have been for Samurai. Now, of course, one of the biggest things was that Samurai was actually supposed to be in patch 3.0. I'm going to quote this from an interview with Nova Crystallis, where they say that Yoshi P said the following: the role must be differentiated from its peers. For example, Paladin are shield tanks while Warriors are seen as more active, so how do they differentiate Dark Knight? The team then considers player feedback while designing the theme of the job. Until the last minute, they actually considered Samurai instead of Dark Knight for the tank class. However, they decided against it because they'd introduced Ninja with those similar Far Eastern elements already. So there you have it, right? Samurai tank confirmed. Well, hold your horses. I know a lot of you want to see Samurai as a DPS, so how about I give you an interview where Yoshi P pretty much states that, well, he kind of thinks Samurai should be a DPS. This quote comes from cgmagonline.com, where they asked him specifically about the Samurai. When asked about it, Yoshi P says, in terms of how fans reacted, it makes me think, so if we were to put in a Samurai, how's it going to play into the realm of Final Fantasy XIV? Would it be a tank? But that doesn't seem to make sense because Samurai seems to be more of a DPS. Or if we were to go in the vein of a tank, wouldn't it be a Shogun? These kind of thoughts start brewing in my head. So it seems that Yoshi P is pretty torn, but based on that, he seems to think, when he hears Samurai, he seems to think DPS and relate Shogun more to tanks. So I guess it really is going to be torn, but he really wants to know what the players want. So of course, if you've been giving him feedback, just know that your opinion is not going unheard. Just know that there are two sides to this coin, so you may not win it regardless. So again, what do we pick? Should I say I want it to be a tank or a DPS? Well, I luckily have the rest of the Final Fantasy history to look at before I make my decision. So how did Samurai really work in the previous Final Fantasy games? It's always kind of been this really high DPS but very heavy armor wearing job. Whether that means it's a tank or a DPS, it's pretty hard to tell. People have always gone either route, maybe equipping them with extra tanky accessories in order to make them more survivable to utilize their utility, or as upfront DPS that can do a lot of damage with their special abilities. Some games mix and match both of their abilities, especially the initial appearance in Final Fantasy V, where not only did they have a chance to evade attacks occasionally, they also had the ability Gill Toss. Uh-oh. Sounds like this is going to be the job for Mithri or Ash, because they're going to be able to one-shot any boss, #world first. But really, that just leaves us right down the middle. And you know what? Final Fantasy XI really doesn't help us decide this. So in Final Fantasy XI, Samurai and Ninja were released at the same time. Now, when those jobs were initially launched, they actually had a bit of an identity crisis, where Samurai was initially intended to be a tank by the developers, one that utilized high parry rating, heavy armor, the occasional ability to dodge attacks, and high damage to maintain enmity, as well as specific gear that would help them out in that regard as well. Then on the other hand, Ninja was actually intended to be a DPS in Final Fantasy XI. They had powerful throwing weapons, they had high damage magical ninjutsus that could be chained together to bypass elemental resistances, not entirely, but to at least reduce the rate at which they would be resisted. They had fast attacks and strong weapon skills, high evasion, low defense, but most importantly, they had a little tool called Utsusemi, which allowed them to avoid physical attacks, between 3 or 4 of them, depending on which spell was cast, and that's really where the tables got turned. When players saw Samurai's high DPS output, as well as its safety with its high armor and defensive capabilities, and they saw Ninja's ability to evade damage altogether, the players pretty much swapped the roles here. And you know what? The developers supported it. Sure, over the years they added things that may have seemed like maybe we want people to try to be a little bit more versatile on these jobs. I remember doing some content with Samurai Sub Ninja as a tank, although that was really only salvaged now that I think about it. Ninjas could virtually tank anything back in the day, they just had to throw on some high damage mitigation gear, some enmity, sub Dark Knight or Bard back in the day, and they were good to go. It's really strange to see how Samurai has always had this identity crisis of tank versus DPS. And you know what? I think with this information, I'm ready to make a decision. It's just crazy to think that Samurai eventually got tools such as Seigen, which basically made it so that their ability to allow them to dodge attacks, Third Eye, could do it multiple times in a row. They also had Yegisumi, which would allow them to dodge special attacks and would actually enhance their attack further if they managed to dodge more than one of them. Ninja even had a DPS stance and a tank stance, now that I remember it, both at level 40, I think Yonin and Inin. So it's pretty crazy just to see how these jobs have always faced this identity crisis. But I think I'm ready to make my decision what I want Samurai to be. Now, as compelling as both sides are, I'm going to have to make my final decision that I would like to see Samurai enter Final Fantasy XIV as a DPS. Now, this is actually a bit of a difference from what I've said about the job in the past, where I have initially envisioned it as a tank. I mean, I think of things like maybe the Samurai having a dash ability similar to what the Dark Knight has now, but they dash to the other side of the boss, slicing clean through them and getting themselves in an immediate position to face the boss away from the target. That seems to make sense for a Samurai. It also could be another high damage tank similar to the Warrior that is able to open up multiple weaknesses on the opponent. Samurai are known for having multiple different kinds of weapons, blunt katanas, sharp katanas, and it's even not uncommon to see a samurai use a polearm. So piercing, slashing, blunt, multiple weapon types, it would be a pretty interesting position to put a tank in. The thing is, the whole parry thing has been done before, and how do you really implement an ability like Third Eye, which literally lets you dodge almost any attack that would hit you, as long as it wasn't a certain type of attack, magic, for example, being one of them. It's really interesting to see the direction they could take with Samurai as a tank, and as much as I'd love to know what they would do for it, I think Samurai deserves to be a DPS in Final Fantasy XIV. One of the big reasons, we already have two sword-wielding tanks. One of them wielding a greatsword, and one of them wielding a single-handed sword. And one of the most requested things in the game, something that I would like to see as well, is a sword-bearing DPS. Now, granted, people have said red mage using rapiers. Rapier is a type of sword. People have also said blue mage using scimitars, type of sword. They could use any sword, really. I mean, they're not forced to just use these two specific types of swords. But with those being the other two jobs teased, does it even make sense to make Samurai a DPS alongside them? Also, some people argue it's a katana, not a sword, but whatever. Katana's a type of sword. It's a Japanese sword. But I don't know. I think we've seen enough of these DPS jobs in 11 go be a tank in Final Fantasy XIV. I think Samurai has a lot more potential in the DPS role than it does in the tank role. Sure, there are some cool things that it can do thematically that would make it be a great tank. Being a Samurai, I just imagine the one-on-one battle where they're pairing attacks against each other, launching an attack, parrying an attack, dodging under the sword. I mean, it's all really stupid in my head of fantasies, but honestly, I want to see it be a DPS at this point. I think having 3 tanks is enough. We don't need another sword-bearing tank. I'd rather they take that time to make a more interesting tank, something that isn't just another close-range sword user or axe user in the case of Warrior. I want to see some creativity, so let's move Samurai over to the DPS role. I think that while there are some people that want to see it as a tank, this will make the majority of people happy. But let me know what you think. What do you want Samurai to be, tank or DPS? You're not allowed to say healer. You're not allowed to say, they're not going to slash people to heal them, guys. I've seen so many people make this joke before. No Samurai healers. On that note, be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share your opinion in the comment section of the video below. But anyway, I'll see you guys in the next video, and until then, take care.